good afternoon and welcome to Jiggers' Place. I'm your host, Kevin Bemel, and we are here every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time to have a cocktail, relax as we head toward the end of the week, and talk about what I call all of the things that that make life worthwhile. Everything excluding business and professional issues, which I talk about on my shows the other 3 days of the week. And so today, I'm going to be talking about a subject that certainly when I was growing up was not the least bit controversial, but it certainly has become so in the contemporary world, and that is the conduct that exemplifies a man. And as a cocktail to go with that, I've chosen a classic gin martini. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, martinis, isn't that the James Bond cocktail? And indeed, James Bond is famous for the, martini, shaken, not stirred, that whole sort of thing. But the James Bond martini is actually a vodka martini, and it's not made with vermouth. It's made with something called Lillet Blanc, which is, to the best of my research, is not kosher. So I couldn't make a James Bond type martini. And in any event, martinis, particularly gin martinis, are one of my favorite cocktails, and so. And it's something, honestly, that I'm known for, and so that's what we're going to have today. I'm going to be using one of my favorite gins, and this is not just because it's my favorite, but in honor of the Olympic Games that just recently concluded in Paris, France. This is Citadel Gin. It's a pretty classic dry gin in the London dry gin mode. But it comes from France, and one of the things I like about it is it has kind of overtones of citrus, in particular lemon, but it also has a very sort of classic gin style, juniper, cardamom, those kinds of spices, and in contradistinction to one of my other very favorite gins, Opier, which has a very strong Oriental palate. Now, when I say Oriental, in this case, I'm talking about the sort of bygone days difference between what was called Occidental, which was sort of Western Europe and that area, versus the Orient, which included everything from the Mideast, Turkey, on in through the rest of Asia. So, but Opier is a fantastic gin. Just not the best gin to have to use for making a martini. And I'm going to be using extra dry vermouth. This happens to be Cinzano. This is an Italian vermouth. It's very dry. They've been making it in Italy since 1757. So this is kind of the new world meets the old world, and a good martini is just those two ingredients. Now, for those of you who are fans of the TV show MASH from the 1970s, you may recall the brilliant Alan Alda line about how he likes his martinis dry, very dry, and basically his martini is gin while he looks at a picture of Albert somebody or other, the inventor of vermouth. I do like a drier martini, not quite as dry as Hawkeye. So I mix my martinis at a ratio of 4 parts gin to 1 part vermouth. And I prefer making my martinis in a mixing glass. So that's what I'm going to do here. And basically, I'm going to mix 2 ounces of gin Okay, and in the ratio of 4-to-1, that means that I'm going to put in a 1/2 ounce of vermouth. Sure, yeah, that's right. By the way, you can see that only part of this bottle is used. I do keep my vermouth refrigerated. It lasts longer that way. Gin and whiskey and those kind of things I don't keep refrigerated. Okay, and then I'm gonna add ice, of course, to it. Now, one of the key things about mixing cocktails is they really, once you put the ice in, and I'm using a bar spoon, I'm just gonna mix this. It's not, you don't want to just sort of give it a quick mix and that's it. You really want to, ice it down. For those of you who watched last week when I was doing a cocktail in a shaker, by the time I was done, you could see the whole outside of the shaker was frosted. In this case, it's somewhat the same thing. The outside of the mixing glass should be frosted. So a good, 15, 20 seconds. And you might be thinking, well, but isn't that going to water down the martini? And the reality is, yes, it is going to water it down a little bit. But water opens up most spirits, and so that's a good way to do them. And in this case, the martini comes out just beautifully nice and clear. You can see that. There you go. You can see it's kind of frosty in the glass. That's a good gin martini. So just hang tight here. I'll see you. So here we are in my living room, and Jiggers' place is essentially my bar right behind me. And as I said, the topic for this afternoon's show is conduct that exemplifies a man. So I'll tell you a little story from my teenhood, I guess it's called. I was 16 years old. I had just gotten my driver's license, and so was excited to drive anywhere. And my mother started taking advantage of that. I don't literally mean taking advantage like taking advantage of me, but if she wanted to go somewhere, she would ask me, hey, do you want to drive me to the store or whatever. And so here I am, my newly minted driver's license, and we get in the car and I drive my mother to the store, and I get out of the car and I proceed to walk to the store, and I get maybe 5-10 yards from the car and I realize my mother isn't with me. I went back to the car on her side, and she's sitting quietly in the front passenger seat, just quiet as can be. And I open the door for her, and she says, "Thank you." And she gets out of the car, and we proceed to walk to the store. And it was an object lesson for me in what it was from my mother's perspective to be a man, or perhaps a gentleman, in the parlance of the day. This would have been 1976 when I turned 16. And when we walked into the store, she waited for me to open the door for her. And it wasn't that my mother couldn't open her own car door or open the door to the store. She certainly could have. It was that she insisted that I treat her with a certain level of respect. And that's what that was all about. So now, fast forward about 2.5 years later, I'm in college, and I had invited a young woman to go on a date with me, and we decided we were going to go see a movie. And I had, I think I borrowed a friend's car because I didn't have a car in my freshman year, although maybe it was my sophomore year when I had a car. Maybe it's 3 years later. But in any event, drive the car to the movie theater, pull into the parking lot, get out of the car and come around to open the door for the young woman I was with. And she sees me coming to open the door, and she quickly opens the door and gets out. And she looks at me, she says, "What, you don't think I can open the door for myself?" And I said, "No, I'm sure you can." I said, "I was taught that the polite thing is for a man to open a door for a woman. It has nothing to do with ability. It has to do with showing her respect." And she gave me a rather contemptuous look. Now, that was a harbinger for the way the rest of the date went. And as I'm sure you might imagine, we didn't go out on another date. I never asked her, but I'm pretty sure she would have said no had I asked her. And we're talking about the difference between 1976 and 1978 or 79, and also a generational difference, of course, because my mother is 25 years older than I am, so yeah, a generation different, and you can see there was a significant change. Now, that's not to say that all the women of my mother's generation looked at men the same way, nor that all the women of this young woman's generation looked at men the same way that she did. Suffice it to say, though, I recognized at a teenage age that women looked at men or what they wanted from men was very, very different. And over succeeding years, it's been an issue of great interest to me. What is the conduct that exemplifies a man? And you'll have to excuse me, I have to have a sip of my martini. So, first of all, just the title of this show, I think, tells you a little bit about my perspective. What a man looks like, I don't think is particularly relevant. So it's common today, much more common today among younger men, for example, that they have a beard. And men of my generation far less likely to have a beard, unless you're in my community, which is a religious Jewish community, where having a beard is an eons long tradition. But in general, men my age don't wear a beard. And in fact, my college girlfriend, I call her because it was the only real girlfriend I had in college, she badly wanted me to grow a beard, and I did. And the same day that we broke up, I shaved off the beard and mustache, and was grateful never have to wear a beard or a mustache again. So, while you see me typically dressed in a suit or a tie with a shirt and a vest, I dress that way because I want to project a certain image. Just because a man does not dress that way doesn't mean that he is not exemplifying being a man. What I find is dressing this way helps reinforce my conduct toward that which I think, toward the way that I think a man should behave. And so that's why I dress the way that I do, even when I'm not doing a show. So if you come by on Friday night on the Sabbath, I'll be dressed minimally like this, almost always with a tie on. And that's when I spend the Sabbath by myself, because for me, I
I'm very comfortable dressing this way. So what is then the conduct that exemplifies a man? And I've got several ideas about that, and I'm going to share those with you. First of all, a man acts responsibly. He takes responsibility for, first of all, himself, his conduct, his behavior. Second of all, for the well being of the people around him. Now, if he's married, that means his wife and children. If he has children, he takes responsibility for his dog if he's out walking them. If he is part of a family, but he's not married yet, he takes responsibility for the well being of his parents, of his sisters, of his brothers, of his cousins, his aunts, his uncles. In other words, there really isn't a boundary to the people for whom a man takes responsibility for their well-being. Now, that isn't to say that he impoverishes himself, for example, giving money so that, poor people have what to eat and those kind of things. I don't mean it in that way. What I mean is that, for example, a man will hold the door open, not just for a woman, but he will also hold the door open for a man who is older than he is. Even given that man can, like any woman, open a door for himself. He's expressing respect for that man as being his senior in age. It doesn't matter a bit whether, the man holding the door is a top professional and the man for whom he's holding the door is an older man who appears to be a laborer. That is completely immaterial to the conduct of a man. A man looks at all men as being worthy of respect until they show themselves to not be worthy of that respect. And that's a key quality. So a man demonstrates respect for people, for women especially. There's a bit of chivalrous conduct there, but for men as well. And he also shows respect for children. Now, when I say he shows respect with children, what I mean is he requires that children behave appropriately for their surroundings. So I'll give you an example. This is going back a number of years ago. It was a Saturday morning, and I was at my synagogue for prayer service. And the service had just recently ended, but as is oftentimes the case, there were a few people who didn't finish their prayers with the group, and so they were still in the sanctuary finishing their prayers. Nonetheless, some young boys decided that they were going to play a game of chase each other and tag through the sanctuary. And I was putting away my what's called a tallis, my prayer shawl, and I see these boys running through, and I stopped them, and I said, stop that right now, come with me. And I took them out into the lobby, and I said to them, there are people praying in the sanctuary, and that is a sanctuary anyway. Running and screaming and playing tag in the sanctuary is not appropriate, and you may not do it. Now, I didn't yell at them. I didn't raise my voice. I just explained it to them very directly that their behavior was not appropriate. One of the boys responded by saying, "You can't say that to me. My father will take care of you." And my response to that child was, "Really? Do you think so? Let's go talk to your father right now." So after a Jewish service on a Saturday, there's something called a kiddush. It's basically you have a little snack and socialize. So I I basically took the boy by the arm. I didn't, hurt him, but I took him by the arm and I took him out to where the Kiddush was happening in the back of the synagogue. And I said, "Where is your father?" And now he's looking a little apprehensive. And so I start walking toward, where the people are. And a man, I can pretty quickly figure out which one his father is, because I can see him looking at me with a look on his face of what's going on here. And I walk up to him and I said, "Is this your son?" And he says, "Yes." And I said, "Your son and two of his friends were running through the sanctuary, and they were doing it even when people were finishing their prayers. And so I told them to stop that, and I asked them to come out into the lobby, and I explained to them that their behavior was inappropriate and they could not do that. And your son said to me in response that you wouldn't like my saying this to him. And so I came out to speak to you about that and find out if indeed you want your son running through the sanctuary and disturbing people who are praying." Right? Poor guy. So the father said, "No, I don't want my son doing that." I said, "Okay, well, good. Here's your son, and good Shabbos, good Sabbath," right? And I left. That was it. So, to my mind, that was being respectful to that child. From my perspective, and I realize there are parents out there who do believe that corporal punishment is appropriate. I'm not going to argue that point here right now, but explaining to a child appropriate conduct, even though I'm not his parent, is showing respect for that child, because especially a male child, because I'm helping him understand the appropriate conduct for him as he grows up and eventually becomes a man. And now I don't believe in yelling at children. I think that's wrong. But I do believe in talking to children directly, and I do believe that that is a respectful way to treat a child who is misbehaving. To allow a child to continue misbehaving is not respectful, and it is not kind, right? So a man treats everyone with respect until they demonstrate that they are not worthy of being respected. And then at that point, a man will treat human beings with decency, but that doesn't mean that he respects them. And that's the difference between the two. This is a lesson I learned from a friend of mine, because I used to say, well, everybody deserves to be treated with respect. And we had a conversation about that. And actually, I don't believe that people who act disrespectfully should be treated with respect. Now, that doesn't mean that they should be mistreated. They have to be treated decently, but that doesn't mean that I have to respect them. And there are many people, frankly, that I don't respect because their behavior is, frankly, despicable. And a man too, that's another way a man conducts himself is, first of all, he doesn't identify disrespectful behavior as being acceptable. He doesn't respect disrespectable behavior. Okay? That doesn't mean he mistreats people. It's just he doesn't, again, show if someone is mistreating someone else, that person is not, the person doing the mistreating is not is not entitled to respect, and a man would not respect that person. Okay. Now, next is a man acts with integrity. So he holds himself to a moral code, and that moral code is, frankly, chivalric in its antecedents. Okay, and you could go even farther back than that and say it's biblical. The chivalric code, for the most part, was a biblical code because it came out of Christianity. But these are some of the things that I've been talking about. So treating people decently, that's a matter of integrity. So if I treat someone inappropriately, or worse, if I mistreat someone, that is not a reflection on the person. That's a reflection on me as a man. A man does not mistreat people because that's acting without integrity. And a man seeks to act with integrity always. Now, this is a good time to mention a man sometimes makes mistakes. And sometimes he does not treat people respectfully, even though he should. And at times he may even mistreat someone, even though he shouldn't. That goes back to the first aspect of a man, the first conduct of a man, which is he acts responsibly. So the difference between a man and a boy is if a boy mistreats someone, the boy probably has to be told to apologize and to amend his behavior. A man doesn't have to be told to do that. So one of my absolute favorite stories about one of my favorite individuals from history is when George Patton, after he graduated from the military academy, he was in his first billet. He was a newly minted Army second lieutenant, and he was put in charge of making sure the stables where the horses were kept in proper order. This is back when the cavalry still, had horses. I mean, the cavalry, was still a horse-bound, as opposed to what we think of cavalry today, which is more of tanks and that sort of thing. And he showed up one morning to inspect the stables and found that they were in terrible condition. And he approached one of his soldiers, and the soldier, I guess, was kind of, just kind of walking around slowly and not really doing anything. And Patton said to this soldier something along the lines of, "Get to work, like now." And he said, "Excuse my French, damn you." And of course, the soldier heard that and he immediately hopped to it and got to work, as did all the other soldiers that were detailed to clean the stables. And Patton turned around and he left. And he went back to his office and he started thinking about what he had said to that soldier. And he realized that he had made a grave error. And so later that day, he went back to the stables to inspect them. And indeed, they passed muster now. And he called all the soldiers together into a group. And the man that he had spoken to earlier was in the front of the group. And he said to all the soldiers there, he said, "Earlier this morning, I yelled at this man and I said, 'Damn you.'" He said, "While it's perfectly okay for me to yell at a soldier if he's not pursuing his duty with alacrity, it is absolutely wrong for me to say 'damn you' to a soldier." And he turned to the man and he said, "I apologize for saying that to you. I was wrong to do that," in front of all of his men. Now, for those of you who've seen the eponymous movie Patton, you may say, "That's not how Patton acted." But indeed, that is how Patton acted, because his father and his aunt instilled in him the conduct that a man demonstrated. And a man takes responsibility for when he has not acted with integrity. He doesn't have to be told. He figures it out, and then minimally he apologizes, and he does his best to fix it. So Patton couldn't take back his words, but to the best that the record shows, and I've studied Patton's career very deeply, he never said, damn you to another soldier again. Probably said it about the enemy, by the way, which I think is okay. Next, a man exhibits courage. For those of you who have ever received an email from me or have heard me sign off my show, I sign off with courage at all times. Now, this is my way of giving you what's called in Hebrew koyach, strength, because courage is what helps us take our strength and stay true to our values. And a man he's not just physically courageous, okay? Because to be physically courageous at all times could easily turn into something that's foolhardy. If a man is pointing a gun at me and telling me to do something, trying to physically overpower that man is stupid. And having been held up at gunpoint, where the gun was literally right here, it would have been very foolish for me to challenge that young man who was attempting to rob me. I needed mental courage at that moment, because it just so happened all I had on me was my pager, which tells you how long ago this was, and my keys to my apartment. I had run out to take care of an emergency at another building that I managed, and that's all I had. And this young man holding me up wanted money, and I had to convince him that I did not have any money without getting shot. And I can tell you the gun he was holding on me was a 22 caliber Ruger target pistol. And if he had shot me at that close range, he probably would have killed me. So the courage I needed at that moment was the courage of restraint, right? Sometimes the courage we need is the courage to stand up and really adhere to what we believe in. Sometimes the courage we need is the courage to stand up to other people who are mistreating someone and say, you are mistreating this person, stop it. That's the kind of courage that exemplifies the conduct of a true man. He won't stand by while other people are being abused or mistreated, but he won't act foolishly just to show that he has courage. So that's when I sign off courage at all times. That's the kind of courage I'm hoping will bless you. Next, a man is humble. He doesn't need to brag about his accomplishments, to show off how big a man he is. In fact, one of the best ways to tell that a male is not a man is because he regales you with stories of his manhood. Now, you might say, well, isn't that what you're doing right now? You could certainly say that. I'm using some examples from my life in order to make the picture more vivid. But if we spend time together, I think you would find that I will not regale you with tales of my manhood because, first of all, I think that's obnoxious. And second of all, a man doesn't do that. A man is humble. He's humble about his accomplishments. He's humble about his behavior. He's humble about his attitude toward other people. he doesn't need other people to believe that he's superior. That is irrelevant. How people size him up against others makes no difference at all. What matters is that he stays true to his values and he conducts himself according to those behaviors and values that exemplify a man. Right? So, one way that you can tell someone is truly a man is other people identify him as such. But it's just like when someone tells you, I'm an honest person, that's when you got to hold on to your wallet, right? If they have to tell you they're honest, they may not be honest. If someone has to tell you he's a man, there's a strong likelihood he's not a man. Okay? A boy tells you that he's a man. A man stays silent on that subject. Next, a man is committed. This goes with courage and many of the other behaviors that we've talked about. Okay? So he's not easily swayed off of his goal. He has perseverance, especially when it really matters. So sometimes life is grindingly hard, and taking care of a wife and children just saps a man's strength. A man would never abandon his wife and children. Never, no matter how tough it was, because he's committed to them. He's committed to his family. Okay? He may get tired. He may get frustrated. He may need to take a vacation, but he's committed, and he will not break that commitment. And why? Because a man is self-disciplined, and he acts with self-discipline. This again, going back to the difference between a boy and a man. When you have a male human being, if his behavior, and if in order for his behavior to be appropriate, it requires outside restraint, he's not a man yet. Now, let me be quick to note, even the best of men sometimes lose control, and they require other men, or maybe even their wife, to help restrain them, either physically, or in the case of a wife, it's probably more emotionally. Okay? But in the main, a man is self-disciplined, and a boy is in the main not. And a teenage male, probably somewhere between the two. He's working toward the self-discipline of a man, but he's not really there yet. And so sometimes he does act in an unself-disciplined way. And that's okay, because he's a teenager. He's still maturing. In fact, until a male is into his mid to late 20s, he probably hasn't fully developed as a man yet. And so one could expect that at times he will act in an unself-disciplined way. The growth of a man comes from acting ever more self-disciplined as he gets older. He's maturing as a man. And last, and certainly not least, a man is loyal. He's loyal to his wife. He's loyal to his children. He's loyal to his friends, to his community, to his country. Okay, and you see this, by the way. I was studying this morning because in what's called the weekly Sedra, it's the part of the Torah that's read each week in the synagogue on Saturday. Is from Deuteronomy, the portion where the Ten Commandments are repeated, and the second of the five, the second five of the Ten Commandments deal with relationships between people. And they include things like don't murder, don't steal, which actually means really don't kidnap, and don't covet what another man has. A man, a true man, would never covet what another man has. Rather, he would support him in what he has, even if that man is faltering sometimes and not doing his best in taking care of his wife, his children, etc. A boy, on the other hand, he will covet all the time. So if you have a 60-year-old male or a 55-year-old male who's covetous, he is not a man. He can be that old. He can have a full-grown beard. He can be making a lot of money and have had a lot of professional success, but he's not a man because he has been disloyal to his community. A man can be 60 years old. If he cheats on his wife, he's not a man because he's been disloyal to his wife. So this is the conduct that exemplifies a man from my perspective. Okay, so I'm just going to go over them real quickly again. He's responsible. He acts with integrity. He is courageous. He's strong. He's humble. He's committed. He's self-disciplined, and he's loyal. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Boy Scout law, a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. You'll notice that much of the conduct that I've just described is reflected in the Scout law. That the Scout law, and I'm not going to get into the contemporary version of the Boy Scouts, but the Boy Scouts, as they were historically constructed, going back now 100 years, the point of the Boy Scouts was to help boys become men, and you see that reflected in the Scout law. So if you want a great code to refer to that helps explain the conduct of a man, go take a look at the Scout law, the Boy Scout law, and that will help you. So here's a toast to you. Thank you so much for joining me. Have my last sip of my martini. Before I go, I have to show you this. This is a coaster that I got when I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. This is a picture of the Hotel Cavalier in Virginia Beach. It was originally built in 1927 and renovated in 2018. It's an absolutely fabulous hotel. If you are planning a trip to Virginia Beach, I cannot endorse this hotel highly enough. I have no interest in the hotel. I don't own shares of stock in it or anything like that. What I can tell you is it is beautiful. The service there is fantastic. I assume that the distillery that was there when I visited in 2018 is still there. So you can go to Tarnished Truth, I think it's called, distillery, and have a tour and have a couple of tipples. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. In the bar, they had a jazz trio, I think it was, when I was there. Fantastic music, beautiful gardens, sweeping lawn in front. Just, it gives you a sense of the grace of the South at its very, very best. So wanted to share that with you before we sign off. So thank you again so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes here toward the end of your week to relax with me and let me share some thoughts with you. As always, I'm interested to hear what you think. Links to my social media will be in the show notes after this episode posts on YouTube, and would love to hear your thoughts, positive or negative. It's always nice. It's negative comments give me food for thought, and I appreciate those at least as much, if not more, than positive comments. So this is our show. This is our last show for this week. Next week on Monday at 10 a.m. is my show, Trusts and Estates Weekly. Tuesday at 10 a.m., these are all Pacific time, by the way, is Business Lessons from the Military. And Wednesday at 10 a.m. is the next edition of People Making Money. So I wish you a wonderful evening, a wonderful rest of the week, and a restorative weekend. And I sign off as I always do. Marie, darling, my Southern belle, you are my belle. Courage